Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. So excited to have this dialogue today. And I'm here with three incredible vanguards. So just to get conversation going quickly, we'll pass to Abrima to introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Abrima Erwiah, co-founder of Studio 189, a fashion company based between the US and West Africa, Ghana and Ivory Coast. And I'm also the founding director of the Grummack Institute for Fashion Business at Parsons School of Design. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Abrima. And Dana?
I'm Dana Naberezny. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer for Jewelry for Tiffany Co. I'm Vice President of the Jewelry Design and Innovation Workshop.
Thank you, Dana. And Omar?
And I am Omar Salam. I'm the Creative Director of Sukeina. Happy to be here.
Innovation is such a tricky word, right? You know, people use it in all different ways to describe all different things. I think to me, it either starts a conversation or it ends it. So if I think about like starting it, you see something just unbelievable, which is going to foster further innovation, and it's going to start conversations, and it's exciting, and it's just something maybe you've never seen before. And then when I think about where it kind of ends the conversation, it's this amazing innovation that you feel like should have been there the whole time. It just feels so natural, and it's got some perfection to it in some ways, and that it solves a problem maybe you didn't even know you had. So I do think there's those two different angles on innovation that are equal but completely different.
I'm going to go ahead and echo that a little bit. You know, I think a lot of it has to do with looking, I guess, at the world as we see it and coming up with small solutions sometimes to solve big impact, right? So when I look at also some of the larger activations that are happening now in terms of technology or material innovations or all of these things, if you trace where they're coming from, a lot of times it's like really small ideas. Right. So I think a lot of times it can be a kind of big idea, kind of echoing what you were saying, Dana, but with maybe it could be a small disruption that advances society where we look at the impact of it and we didn't know we needed it, but we needed it, and hopefully the next person or the next person builds on top of it for the advancement of everybody.
How about you, Omar?
To me, innovation is the ability to extract from something quite simple at first, the very essence of it, and bring it back to society in a way that is inclusive of all, whether they saw it in it or not to begin with. So it applies in food and music and whatnot, and fashion as well. So for me, it's an approach, and how deep are we willing to look at something and find something in it that could be perhaps completely different than what we saw at first.
If you put a bunch of people who feel the same, think the same, have the same experiences in a room and try to come up with something, your product, your solution, your process is going to be the same. It's the same. And that's not what you want from an innovation. I was thinking about something you said earlier, and that innovation is this dance, right? Yes. And you know, if every time you have exactly the same partner that you're dancing with, I mean, you might not step on anybody's toes, which is nice in my case, but at the same time, you may not be improving. You may not be finding a new dance. And so I think that is important from the diversity of folks that you work with. And it's not just, to me, it goes from your background, it goes from every part of you, including your personality too, right? So there's gender, there's religion, there's all of those things, but there's also personality types that work really well. And so you have to make, to me, this environment that's safe for people to feel like they can create. So you have introverts and extroverts, and you make space for both. We have one of the things that was a really, really interesting side effect of the pandemic was we used to have these amazing brainstorming sessions in a room, everyone kind of talking about different ideas and getting super excited. And I don't know if I realized, frankly, until the pandemic, that it was those loudest voices. And sometimes there were the people who were a little quieter, who spoke a little more gingerly, that didn't have the chance to get their ideas heard. And so with the pandemic, and you did some things virtually, it gave the opportunity for people to write some ideas in a chat or send an idea ahead of time. And then learning from that gave us the experience of, okay, not only do we need to have this diverse group working on a project, but we need to set up an environment that feels safe for everybody, no matter where they came from.
Everyone's opinion matters. Like there really isn't a right answer. And so like having all of these stakeholders in the conversation, but in the most simplest of way, is really critical to me. And then empowering them, right? Like, and then going, oh my God, that was so good, brilliant. And if possible, let's get that done. How do we do that? Sometimes I might even know that's not gonna work. I'm like, I know it's not gonna work. But because we tried it and you saw it for yourself, that's why it's like a longer game. I know that it's not necessarily gonna work, but you have to feel that yourself. And then they'll analyze that themselves and be like, that wasn't a great, that didn't, but this part did work. And so the next time we try it again and we try it again, and eventually we get where we have to get to, but we do it as a team. And the other thing is mission driven, right? So when we set our purpose at the beginning and we're doing it with mission and purpose and cause, there is no such thing as, it's the mission, right? So we're getting in the car, we're going together, we're doing a fashion show, we're doing this together. And what happens is magic. Like all these elements that should have never worked start to work. Doors start to open, birds start to sing, and you're just like, how did all this work? It should have never worked. It worked because we did it together and everybody brought themselves 100%. And I just want to add, and so many people are so often used to being told no and not being given the chance to get through the door or to show their skill set or their talent. So when they're like, you know, you've got this, the summation of all of that creates just like a spectacular outcome.
As we were starting to talk to folks who were interested in getting into jewelry making, we have one person who works with us who is a cake designer previously, right? So if you think about it, it's this amazingly fine, detailed work that we can transfer and we can change if the person is open and curious, from making a cake to making a beautiful, beautiful piece of jewelry. So that's what it's, you're opening it up to different folks who may not have thought of jewelry or fashion or accessories as a career, and being okay with people not being experts from the beginning, right? and being able and willing to learn, and it's been amazing that way.
I think a lot about the next generation and being at an institution at Parsons, seeing their work and seeing what they're going through. You know, they're young and they're looking at this world and they're seeing all this news come at them from so many different places, and it's daunting, you know. And so I think we got to protect them, right? Like, because they got these great ideas. Like, I have students that have ideas like, what do you wear in case of nuclear disaster? Do you even think about that? But do you think about that? But that's like kind of brilliant, because I don't think about it, you know, like, or what do you do when there's a wildfire? What are you wearing, right? So like, they're designing, thinking of those things in mind as a reality, right? You know, so like, it's designed beautifully, but also, if all of a sudden there's a fire right now, are you prepared, right? And so like, really kind of allowing the space for someone who's not looking 5 years ahead of them, they're looking 100 years ahead of them, 80 years ahead, you said 2021, 24, like their mind is way over there and they're imagining sometimes a dystopic future or what it could look like as a reality. But they also believe that everybody can be whoever they want to be. Like, it's very beautiful, it's very open, it's very realistic, and also there's so much joy inside.
I'm super, super lucky to work at Tiffany & Company under this LVMH umbrella, and we have programs, apprentice programs and internship programs, and we have this beautiful thing called Tiffany Atrium, which is reaching out to different communities, and with that, it's allowing folks in those communities and fostering that curiosity and that empathy, but also for us as kind of as employees and working with them to to also have that, to experience new things, and to, when I walk through our innovation workshop and there's an apprentice sitting there and they're doing something for the first time and they're asking questions and they feel comfortable asking those questions, it's amazing. So the question part of it really hit me, I think, in what you said a lot, because I think that's what we need to do for the next generation is make them feel comfortable with those questions, and give them scaffolding or environments that enables them to do that.
They have to see you. You have to be in the room. You have to have a voice, and they have to see you actually get it done. This is really important. Like, just a few examples. When we won that CFDA with you, the sustainability, the number of people that wrote me and said, "We won," I was like, "We did?" I was like, "We did." And you know how much I worked on. They were like, I got messages from all over Africa, all over the world, "We won." But what it did also is I realized that so many people, and when we also did the Fashion Fund together, who would have never applied, began to apply, because they saw people that looked like them. Same with Aurora James, same with other folks. They were like, oh, same with LVMH Pride. You know, when they see someone who looks like them in the room, who wins, not just somebody who was like, oh, it's cute, you got a little invitation, that's really cute. Now, someone who put in the work, who did their thing, and who showed up and who excelled, but out of the strength of the work, right? Like the work itself. It sends a message, and also that there was equity. There wasn't, just equity, right? It sends a message to other people. So, for example, when we did trade shows in the beginning of Studio 89, I would have young women run up to me and go like, you're the only woman of color that owns thousands of brands, and they'd be like, you're the only one, and I'd be like, I'm probably dancing or something. I'd be like, what? And they're like, no, really, like just you here, and then they would just kind of like hang out and be like you ask a lot of questions, right? Or like, can I ask you more? Can you mentor me? All these things. And it's like, because there's nobody that looks like you. And so when we started Studio 89, also being in the factory in Ghana, a lot of times, for historical reasons, you don't see a woman of color leading a factory and or an organization. It is somebody who comes in who says like, this is great, and like, what are you doing? And like takes it away. So when they see me in that position, I start to get, I want to go back to school, or I want to go to school, or I'll never get to go, but this is my daughter, or this is my son, and I would like to understand how I can get to where you got to. I'm like, I didn't get anywhere. They're like, no, really, I'm serious. How do I get to do that? And so what it does is it creates space. And sometimes the simplest action is just showing up.
I'd love to hear from each of you, taking purpose and innovation and guiding towards people and planet safe, inclusive, equitable futures. Can you share some examples of, either in your day-to-day work, in your initiatives, or something that you, so the North Star, are working towards, you feel is guiding towards people and planet friendly innovation?
I do think, at least from a personal standpoint and professional, is that I am really focused on the areas of adaptability in fashion and other areas. I feel like, every single one of us is going to have a disability at one point in our life or take care of someone who does. So that's everybody. So we should be looking at solutions for everybody, whether it's in what we're designing and what we're working with, or the environment that we're promoting it or we're selling it. And so for me, that's definitely something that's I get very passionate about personally. Is if you're thinking about luxury, that's the true luxury, to be able to create something that can work for different folks with different needs, different responses. We talk about ourselves, we're generally not one size fits all in any way, but in addition, there is a very large number of abilities that each one of us has, and if we can cater to that, again, I do think that's one of the ultimate luxuries, and creates the most inclusive environment we can for those who we work with, and that we're trying to create product for.
Abrima, as well, what you have designed through your ecosystems has inspired a generation. And not only do you work in industry, but you have so much, your business is so full, and you still are additionally taking on this amazing role as an educator, and you're innovating in academia. But maybe, building on what's been said here, I'd love to hear from you, speak from that vantage point as well, because you're seeing education and industry, past, present, future, and it's all social innovation, and you're really designing communities in what you're...
Well, and that's what I wanted to touch on. I think my mind thinks a lot about kind of systems thinking, and a lot about like connecting the dots, both from a kind of economic, this is just what goes on in my brain.
You think across design and business,
yes,
symbiotically.
like from an economic, political, social, like I like to reverse engineer. So what does that mean? Because what I think sometimes tends to happen is we make something a singular reason, and then it's that thing. But if you reverse engineer, you realize like there's so much behind that, right? It's really not that thing. And there's hundreds of years of something, and something happened, whether there's migration of people and or plant, and we're going somewhere, right? So it's not as simple as that, but it could be simple. So if we pull back again, really systems design, right? So, who are these stakeholders? This is really important, because we've developed and engineered this way where we're thinking about certain stakeholders and we're cutting out a lot of stakeholders. And we really need to bring all these stakeholders back in and then kind of rethink that system. And in doing that, which is kind of what's led me to education and training, you realize that in order for kind of this many people to continue on, especially with the implementation of technology and new future solutions, I really if you want to say what keeps you up at night sometimes, I really think about how do we ensure that we make it into the future? Not some people, but many of us, right? I mean, one of the places where I come from that I was recently there is a village that's built on water, right? I'm in Zima. And so this is a neighboring village to mine, but they've been there for hundreds of years, even pre-American slavery, built on water, stilts on water. So you got to think about what will happen when and this is all over the world. We have these when they managed to get through hundreds of years, and then all of a sudden you're going to wipe them out, and so we don't see them in the future. So obviously I translate that with artisans, and I translate this concept with fashion design and creativity, because I do believe it has to be kind of beautiful first for people to resonate and for them to hold on to it. But designing from a place of beauty, but also designing from the architecture of the underbelly that it sits on top of is that kind of systems thinking, right? So how do we bring all of this into the future? Well, one of it is education, right? You can't unlearn what you've learned. You could take everything from me, but you cannot take that away from me, right? And that for me is a source of dignity, and that's a source of equity, and that's when we start changing the level of conversation. And so when I think about how do we look at what everybody is doing, how do we consider planet and people and humanity at its core and all these elements, and how do we kind of simplify it and reorganize it and then apply technology, right, to make it something that we can do? And then how do we document it? Because our stories are often oral and they get lost and we disappear. How do we preserve and maintain that? Education is important and fundamental. And then how do we take the use of technology and move that into the future so we could scale it? And what I'm obsessed with right now is scaling. How do we, because I see all these incredible small brands, including ourselves and including yours, that come and do all this cool stuff, and then 2 or 3 years later we never see them again. And we're facing the same challenge and the same challenge and the same challenge and the same challenge, and then we lose is it capital, is it resources, with great intentions, and especially if we're talking about circularity, sustainability, because our heart is not money first, our heart is people, planet first, and so our money goes and we go, no more money, right? And we saw that in the pandemic. So how do we get to 5, 10, 15, and that's where when I look at students also, because they don't have to make those mistakes. It's there's no ego here, right? You don't need to make our mistakes and or not mistakes. Just here's the blueprint. Take it and build, and let's build again, and let's build again, and let's scale. So that's what I think about. And the other thing I'll just say is where do you see that manifest for us? I think the fashion show. I think the fashion show is kind of this beautiful moment for me where we do way too much, but as a way of kind of bringing it to making you feel it in your heart, in your spirit, right? We have kids because we want to show the next generation. We have dancing because we sit in our joy. You know, we have textiles that have been repurposed or that can be recreated and redone, made in small communities. And I feel like in this one moment, if you look at the arc of how the show goes and the various singers, it tells this full story, but underneath it is us trying to really think about how do we build these systems, because in my heart and in my dream, I hope in 10 years, I get to still be with you. Like, I get to be sitting here with you still, and there's way more of us, and we don't, like you said, we don't have to own it. We don't have to be at the center of it. It just replicates itself. And so like all of these people get to move into the future instead of this kind of society we have now where this many people are getting to decide who gets access to healthcare, who gets this and who gets that. We need to bring all of us into the future, but we're doing it with design and beauty.
Dina, you know, in your work at Tiffany Co, specifically in the design and innovation workshop, we've talked a little bit about how you bring people together and cross-pollinate. Can you share with us just a little bit about, you know, your perspective on in your work with craft and technology, and also just the materiality of luxury and everything that you're working with? Just are there any like use cases or examples that really excite you about the work that's happening there?
So many. What'd you say? 10 minutes? Okay. So but I'll go specific and general for a second. Yeah. General, we opened our doors to our innovation workshop in 2018. And I remember one of the women that we were building it with, who was on the construction side, I was trying to explain the vision of what I saw and how people would collaborate and how this marriage and how technology can amplify the craft. And I was so excited and, you know, talking with my hands and very happy about what we were going to build. And she was like, okay, sure, I'm sure this is going to happen. And then we moved in, we opened our doors, and she comes running into my office and she goes, oh my gosh, you have to come out now. Now, let me also just say, as a facility that makes prototype and has gas and fire, when someone runs into your office and says you have to come out now, there's a little fear going on there. But I came out, and the reason I came out was she said, it's happening. What you said is happening. And it was just amazing to see, and it's every day, a master craftsperson sitting next to an engineer and sitting next to a CAD designer, and they're feeding off each other. And it's not, my most hated word is handoff. I can't stand that word. And it is, to just see that collaboration was amazing. So to me, that's every day. And that has become part of that. It's like a language of love for what we do every day, to have that collaboration around the table. So that is what I'm proudest of, that keeps going. And you can see it. So if you go specific, you can see it in some of our amazing icon collections. I'm wearing, of course, Knot and Lock and all of those that we have, because they've got these amazing integrated clasps. And that wasn't thought of by one person. It was a collaboration between these CAD designers and engineers and quality professionals and craftspeople sitting around and saying, how's this going to work? And it becomes, I was thinking about what you were saying before, it becomes a dance, because innovation is that dance, and you're going back and forth and just trying to figure out, what am I looking at and how is it going to see the light of day? And it did wonderfully. But it all comes back to sitting around a table and listening, and just that electricity that passes between you. So to me, that's where the moment that I'm most proud of is the moment that happens every day when we're presented with it.
In the context of sustainability, I happen to believe that there haven't been, as far as I can remember, shortage of innovation, great ideas, great products. As far as I can remember, you can argue that sometimes it's more intuitive than not, or other times it's more creative than not, but creation has happened, and in fact at a rate that is quite high. But in the spirit of really shining light onto things, I think cognition is not so much what the issue is when it comes to sustainability, but recognition and being able to not pause, but be still for a second and back up and look at all the creations and all the innovations and all the content that is being put out there, and start to look at each one of them, how it is a piece that if I take a moment to look at the shape of it, I can perhaps figure out where their concave might fit perfectly into the convex of someone else. And really taking it as a whole and not just as parts. What does concern me is, even with the very, very, very beautiful wording, innovation, that at times perhaps innovation could be simply masquerading as just output out there. One thing we can say is we have learned that many, many, many products being put out there that are repetitive or duplicative of one another, while it might not bring value in terms of something unique or new or inspiring, is really not pushing the envelope in terms of evolution, while it is really starting to weigh on the planet as a whole. So I just want to suggest the possibility that what if there are things that were created that could be made better or just be used differently? That's one way of looking at it. And then lastly, just the possibility of being a little bit more rigorous about it. First, each one of us with our own craft. Am I walking away getting more out of designing that I'm bringing onto the table? One of the very platform from which we are working with Kent State is, I loved it when they picked up the phone and said, we would like to have you over at the museum because we happen to believe that Sukeina is cultural artifacts that just happens to be addressed. Clearly, it's very flattering, but it also made me feel good about the fact that how can we simultaneously live in the moment and be a business where we are developing dresses and garments that are supporting the day-to-day woman, but at the same time using that opportunity to create a language, a philosophy, and a way of making things that long after Sukeina is gone. We are today 2024, by 2124, and that's not that far away, none of us and our belonging and our houses and all of that will be here. How can we figure out a way that while we are here creating, we can create something that is of a legacy that, aside from feeding us, from supporting us, our livelihood, can actually set a foot forward towards the future as a literacy, as a contribution to humanity as a whole. And I think that these are the questions that are really questions we need to ask ourselves, and we need to hold each other to a degree accountable. If I'm just creating something that has been created over and over and over again, what am I doing? My call to action is, no one talks about this, maybe because it's embarrassing, so I'm willing to. People come into room and they talk about the fashion industry and they use words that are really intelligent and super smart and super elaborate. To me and to us, we just want to offset it with, yes, fashion industry, but for us, it's a fashion heart story. It was a person that availed their knowledge, their know-how, their ability to sew a dress, to support the livelihood or the beauty or the shape or the comfort of another person. And that heart being extended to another person turned out to be something so good that it scaled into 2 dresses, 4 dresses, a fashion collection, a fashion brand, and today we are talking about $1 trillion industry. And while this number is quite jarring and incredible in terms of growth and scalability, I happen to believe that it is perhaps not wise to disconnect where it started from. And I think that what is missing in the fashion industry, because the function of it has become a big game of numbers and trajectory and deliverables and strategies and all of that, which is super important. But I think the seed of it, the very seed of it, was one person caring enough for another person. And perhaps now that it is tilting and we don't know which way to go and it is affecting the world, perhaps it's time to go back to that, just to rekindle the idea that started to begin with. So yes, the industry is powerful, it is strong, and perhaps talking about the heart of it, when the brain and the function of it seems to be what is always on the table. So my commitment is everywhere I go, since no one wants to talk about the heart of it, that's what I want to talk about.
Dana, Omar, Abrima, this has been such an incredible honor to share this table with you. And I know you'll join me in thanking LVMH for creating this space for the conversation. And I hope that this inspires more conversation in the future. I thank you for this time with you.